Hello and welcome back to another Saturday with Coriander Quilts. I'm excited to have all of you here today. I know many of you are probably stopping by because today is our kickoff video for the Cali & Co. Mystery Block of the Month. If you are new to this channel and you haven't heard anything about this sew along, it's lasting for all of 2025. One mystery block pattern will be released every month starting today, with the final block and finishing instructions coming out the third Saturday of December. I've been talking about this sew along for quite a while, and I'm excited that it's finally here. If you need information about the sew along, I have links in the description box below that would include your fabric requirements, a calendar of all of the dates that the blocks will be released, as well as a helpful video where I answered a bunch of viewer questions. So let's just dive right in. Before I start chatting about our sew along today, how about this sweatshirt? Let me tell you, my sister Nicole, I think we are getting her over here to the quilting dark side because she made this for me and gave it to me for Christmas. And she also made two other quilty sweatshirts for her mother-in-law and her sister-in-law. So we might just be getting her moving over to the quilting side of things. But I thought I had to wear it today because it's made with Cali & Co. fabrics, and it's just perfect with the Cali & Co. goodness that you see down here on my cutting table. And what better day to be wearing a Cali & Co. sweatshirt. I'm not sure how she made it. Well, I know how she made the piecing part here. Well, not pieced, the applique part here. But these little strings I think are just adorable, and I have never considered swapping out the strings for something cute and quilty. But even if you added nothing else to your sweatshirt aside from some cute quilty strings, I think this is just adorable. I told her this might be my favorite part of the whole sweatshirt. This, and she has this cute little tag that she tucked down here at the bottom. And I think that's just adorable too. So I think we're getting her over to the quilting side, friends. I need to have her back on soon, and we need to share her final quilt, that first quilt that she made last year. It's not quilted yet. This move has set everything back just a little bit, but I plan to have her back. So maybe we can ask her some fun questions about her foray into quilted apparel now that she's made her first quilt. So I wanted to give her the credit for the sweatshirt because I think it's just adorable. Okay. Let's chat Cali & Co. Mystery Block of the Month. What I have here in front of me, these are the fabric requirements, and you can print this out if you haven't done so already. And if you still need to purchase fabrics, Cali & Co. is in quilt shops right now. You do not need to use Cali & Co. fabrics. You can use whatever you like. As soon as you see the first block that I'm sharing today, you're going to see, oh yes, this is perfect for scraps. So if you wanted to work from your scrap bin, you certainly could do that. But I purchased exactly what I have listed here for my Cali & Co. quilt, and I have cut up quite a bit of the fabrics. So I've cut what I needed from my fat 1/8 prints. I've cut a portion of my background fabric, and I'm going to chat about that first because along with today's block pattern, you are going to get this helpful information before we start sheet of paper. This is at the very beginning of the pattern, and I am going to talk through all of this because this talks about cutting. I know some of you like to pre-cut. I fall in that camp. I like to cut in advance so I can plan my cutting just a little bit. Some of you don't like to pre-cut. You prefer to cut the pieces you need from month to month. And some of you might like to do a little bit of pre-cutting or at least know that that option is available. So when I set up my blocks, my patterns for block of the month, I like to give you guys options because I know that we all work a little bit differently. So I'm going to talk down through this, and then you can choose to cut your fabrics however you would like to. So the fabric requirements, this sheet that I shared earlier, these do allow for starching. So if you are a pre-starcher, you can do so. I pre-starched my Tilda fabrics. I'm going to be showing you my Tilda block here in just a moment. I pre-starched them when I was trying out all of my patterns. I did not pre-starch any of my Cali & Co. fabrics. I typically do not pre-starch. So once I tested out the pre-starching with the Tilda fabrics and knew everything worked out just fine, I'm opting not to pre-starch for the Cali & Co. fabrics. You will find a block tutorial video each month here on the Coriander Quilts YouTube page. If you are not subscribed to the YouTube channel, it might be wise to do so, and you can turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any of our Saturday videos. I will be sharing the tutorial along with my regular fun Saturday video. I share those every Saturday. Not tutorials every Saturday, a video every Saturday. Also, on that third Saturday of the month, you are going to find the PDF pattern to be downloaded from the Coriander Quilts blog. Links to the PDFs will be provided in the tutorial video here on YouTube. Let's talk about all of these pieces here. So right here, you're going to see over the course of this 12-month block of the month, we're going to be cutting the following pieces from our Cali & Co. Fat Eighth bundle. And I have listed all of the pieces that you are going to need from your Fat Eighth bundle, or the pieces that you're going to need if you're cutting from scraps or a different fabric line, whatever have you. This is what you're going to need from your prints. Now you can choose to pre-cut, or the patterns are set up that you can see exactly what you need from month to month. You could cut just what you need 1 month at a time. You do not need to pre-cut. If you are pre-cutting, I have a diagram here for your Fat Eighth. This is the 22-inch side and the 9-inch side, and then how the pieces can lay out onto your Fat Eighths. The Cali & Co. Fat Eighth bundle includes 40 Fat Eighths, and the information I am giving here is based on using 40 Fat Eighths. Now you do end up with a fair amount of scraps. These are my scraps from cutting the pieces here. So you can see you do end up with a nice amount of scraps. So if you have a Fat Eighth bundle that maybe includes some low volume prints, prints without a lot of contrast, for example, this white on white dot from Cali & Co. is a low contrast, isn't going to show up very nicely against my background fabric, which is the same print. So I am opting not to use this print. If you have those low contrast prints in your bundle, you can opt not to use a couple of them, and you would still have pieces left over, scraps that you could cut enough fabrics without utilizing all 40 Fat Eighths. Now, as we look here, I am going to, and I already did, cut all of my Fat Eighths the same way. So these are the pieces that I cut. I'm going to show you in just a moment exactly how I chose to cut. But these are the pieces that I cut from every one of my Fat Eighths. Now, when you look at what you need up here, you're going to see that we only need 24 1.5 by 10.5 inch rectangles. If we're using 40 Fat Eighths, that is going to give us extra of that size piece if you're cutting from all 40. And I've noted down here, for this 10.5 inch piece here, you really only need to cut these from 24 of the pieces to end up with those 24 rectangles. So wherever you see these little bits of writing, it's telling you, hey, if you cut all of these pieces from all 40 of your Fat Eighths, you're going to end up with more pieces than you need, just so that you're aware of that. And then the other thing that you need to know about this diagram is that you will also need, once you've cut your pieces, you're also going to need a few additional pieces, and those are listed right here. And you'll just cut those from your scraps here. So these pieces here you're going to need in addition to what you're cutting here. And I wanted to include this extra information about those overages. So if you wanted to cut all of your Fat Eighths the same, you could. But if you wanted to be more exact with your fabric cutting, you could choose to cut exactly what you needed from your Fat Eighths with the information that I've provided. The notes that I've written here on this 4.5 inch square just tell you that with careful cutting, if you have the full 9 inches right here, you may be able to get this 4.5 inch square cut up above right here. And that would give you a nice big chunk of space left over from your scrap side here. That is, if you have that full 9 inches, if you trim a little bit too much off your bottom selvage, trimming it up, then you might not have enough to get that from up above. But just a note there to keep an eye out for that. And then down here at the bottom, the last thing that I talk about here is your background fabric. And I opted to pre-cut a portion of my background fabrics, as I said. And I followed my instructions right here to cut 6 strips, 3 inches by the width of fabric, and 14 strips, 1.5 inches by the width of fabric. You're going to be left with a portion of your background fabric. Hang on to that. You are going to need that a little bit later. And that brings us to the portion of the video where I'm going to show you how I chose to cut out my pieces. I'll slide these to the side. And again, you do not need to cut this way. You can cut whatever works best for you, you know, whether that means pre-cutting, cutting individual pieces, however it works for you. But I think it's nice just to see how you could approach cutting these fat eighths. So I'm going to, first of all, we're going to straighten everything up here. I'm going to cut my selvage off of the side. Let's slide you a little bit over. There we go. We'll trim this side first. It's going to be scrap, and then I'm going to straighten up this bottom edge. And right up here is my 9-inch, right here. And then over here is my 9-inch. So I am going to have the full 9 inches even after I trim this little piece off the bottom here. So if I wanted to, I would have space to put my 4.5-inch square up in this portion. These diagrams are done to scale, which gives you a nice idea of how much extra fabric you'll have once you cut your pieces. Typically, I would be stacking up about 6 layers of fabric is what I like to stack when I am cutting pieces like this. If I'd be cutting a bunch of fat eighths, like when I cut all of these pieces, I stacked up 6 at a time. All right, the next thing I am going to do is I am going to run a strip 4.5 inches all the way across. So I'm going to cut a 4.5-inch strip right here. And that is going to give me a nice piece to cut these 4 pieces off of. There we go. I'm going to just move this up here. The first piece I'm cutting is the 4.5-inch square. I think it's handiest to cut that first. So I'll cut that 4.5-inch square. There we go. And then next I'm going to cut these strips. So I need 2 that are 12.5 inches long. And then I need 1 that is 10.5 inches long. So I think the next thing I'm going to do here is just cut over at 12.5, because that's going to give me this nice piece. If I were to cut the strips first and then trim off over here, that's going to leave me with narrow little strips. By cutting 12.5 off of this side, or cutting at 12.5 on this side, that gives me this nice big square. And that is going to be great because since I know that we're going to need just a couple additional 4.5-inch squares cut from these prints, having this sized piece is going to work nicely for me, because that means I could cut my extra 4.5-inch square off of this piece if I didn't have enough up here. So I'll tuck that to the side. That just gets added to my scraps. And then I will cut 1.5 by 12.5-inch strip. I'm going to cut another 1.5 by 12.5-inch strip. And then this is a 10.5. So I'll trim that to 10.5. Let's move these out of the way up here with those. And then 10.5. Now bear in mind, I am opting not to use this print in my blocks. I'm simply using this print because it was an extra in my fat eighth bundle. So keep that in mind. I am not using this print in my blocks when it comes time to start piecing them together. This is just a demo of the cutting using this print. All right, so we have this section here all cut. So now I need a 3-inch, a 3-inch, and a 2.5. So I am going to cut at 8.5 right here, because 3 plus 3 and 2.5 is 8.5. And then that's going to give me this nice big chunk over here that I can save with my scraps. And this piece, as I mentioned, can also be used for those extra 4.5. You need 8 extra 4.5-inch squares after you've cut your 40 fat eighths. So this would be another print that I could use to cut those from if I were using it in my blocks. The next step is to trim this to 3 inches. Another scrap. And then I'm going to cut my 2 3-inch squares right here. And then this piece, he just needs cut down to 2.5. So we'll just give him a little haircut off the top here. There we go. And then that's just a little trash piece. So the 2.5 and then our 2 3.5s, yeah. And that would be the pieces that you would need to cut from your fat eighth pieces. Once you have cut your fabrics, you are ready to begin with our first block. Let's take a look at what that first block is going to look like. Here is our pattern, page 1. Let me grab my tilde version of this block. Here it is. So as you can see, scrappy and happy. I had a lot of fun making these in the tilde fabrics, and I am really looking forward to it in these Cali & Co fabrics. So this is what it looks like. Very scrappy and a lot of fun to piece. Let's just dive right into the piecing for this block. I'm going to pull the pieces that I need. Let me make a little space here. Move some of these things out of the way. There's the tilde block. Maybe we'll just slide these over here. Okay. I like to keep some of this stuff on screen so that you can see it, but let's move those whites off. They're not as fun to look at on screen. There we go. Okay. So there's all of our pieces. Here's our pattern. You can see our tilde block. So you can see what our goal is for this block. We are going, I'm going to spread these out here so that I can grab these a little easier. So those are my 2.5ers. Here's my 3-inch. And then my 4.5. We are going to need 8 squares that are 3 by 3. I've got my alphabetties tucked over here ready to go. Actually, let me pull over some more things here. Pull over some more tools that I know we're going to be using. Okay. So we need 8 squares, 3 by 3. Let me look here. So these are going to be used, let's see where we're using those in our pattern here. 8 squares, 3 by 3. These are going to be used for the half square triangles. And we're going to need 2, 4, 6, 8 of them. So I want to choose a nice variety of 8 different colors. So let's start with a white. And then I might just go kind of in the order I have things. We'll use that orange print. I want a red, but I want a different print from that one there. So I'll choose that one. Our pink can be that one. Let's see, red, pink, we'll go with yellow. Might as well just go with that little friendly guy. We'll need a green. I don't want the cherry print again, so I don't know if I want that print. Let's go with that one. Green and a blue. I really like this print here. Could choose that one. There's the cherry print again. I like to keep a nice variety of both the colors as well as the prints. I'm just going to set those to the side for right now. I'm going to go to this other shade of blue and see the prints that I have in this lighter blue here. Is it just those? So maybe we're going to, what do you think? We're going to put in this one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, only one more we need here. Let's choose purple or dark blue. Let's go with Let's go with that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so there's our 8 3-inch squares. So we're going to set these to the side. These are my A pieces. And then we need 8 of the 2.5-inch pieces. This is just kind of how I work when I'm pulling. So I want to be able to see these because I want to pull 8 different 2.5-inch squares. I want this to be really nice and scrappy. There we go. So I know I'm going to need a purple for these because I haven't used a purple up above. So let's grab, which purple do I want? I want this one. I'm going to start with that one. And then we're going to skip the whites because this purple is going to take the place of my white in this block. And I don't know, I might end up needing that one. So I'm going to tuck him up there. So we'll do red. I like that yellow. We'll go with this green. I'm going to need an orange. Now I'm probably not going to have enough to do every color of the rainbow for every block, but for this one I'm going to start out that way. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue. So let's go with this color blue this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What do I still need? The dark blue. Maybe we'll just throw those cherries in there. So maybe we'll do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so there's my 8 2.5-inch squares. Those are B. We need 2 of the 10.5-inch. Let's move these out of the way. So that's this size, and then we're also going to need 2 of this size. And these portions, so these pieces here are going to be the center portion of the block, and then these longer strips are going to be these strips here for the block. So we just need to decide what we want to use out there. And you see we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So again, we have 8 colors, so we can kind of, between these long strips and our 4.5-inch squares, we can kind of choose all those same colors again. So let's go with this 10.5 right here. Maybe we'll use this 10.5 right there. I definitely want to use something a little bit darker for the next 2. What should we go with? What do we feel like? This is fun. You can just throw in whatever strikes your fancy. No right or wrong. I'm feeling like this one. I think that's cute. And then maybe something a little bit. Oh, I haven't used any grays yet. I kind of forgot about the grays. We for sure, let's tuck in one of those. Let's just go with that one right there. Okay. Okay. There's that. And then I want to choose different colors than these for this next part. Let's get a nice yellow. And these are going to be for these outer corners here. What yellow do I want? I've used this one already. Oh, let's go with you. You're a friendly little print. Let's get a red in there. We've used that one. So we're going to need this guy right here. Red, maybe an orange. The dot, sure. Let's put you in there. So we have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, maybe a purple. Or I could use, oh, let's go with these cherries. Let's do that. Okay. So these then are, let's see, let me label these so you can see what we're doing here. These are the 10.5, 1.5 by 10.5, and those are C's right there. And then these are my D pieces, 1.5 by 12.5. And then the 4.5-inch squares are E. Now, I am not going to go into as much detail in the upcoming videos about choosing fabrics, but I'm going to be choosing them in a similar way every month. So the upcoming videos, when I release those are very much tutorial videos, and they're going to focus just on the piecing of the blocks, less on the choosing of the fabrics or any of the cutting. So those will be shorter videos going forward. But for this initial video, I kind of wanted to show you more of my process and how I choose fabrics for this block of the month. The next thing that we need is the pieces from the background fabric. Now, one of the things that you could have pre-cut are those 1.5 inch by width of fabric strips. And that's what we're going to be cutting G and H from. And then we have a 3 inch by width of fabric strip that we're going to be cutting F from. So let me make a little more cutting space up here. He's just going to have to tuck up there for a little bit. And there you go. You can see that. So these are my 1.5 inch strips. Now you should be able to cut all of your G pieces and your H pieces from one strip. So I'm just going to leave it folded. My selvages are trimmed. I'm going to leave it folded so I can cut both pieces, both 8.5 pieces at once, and then both 10.5 inch pieces at once. So you see we need 2 8.5 long, 2 10.5 long. Just going to leave it folded. I will cut my 8.5 first. So this is 1.5 by 8.5. This is my G piece, 2 G pieces. I have 2 of those there because it was folded. And then I am going to cut my 10.5 inch pieces. Right there. And then this little piece I'll probably just throw away. I don't think I'll keep that in my scraps. These are my H pieces. And then I'm going to cut those 3 inch squares from one of these 3 inch strips. Again, I'm leaving it folded so that I can cut multiple pieces at once. And we need 8 3 inch squares. Those will be our F pieces. So I'm just going to cut those. And the last pair. And then save this piece because you'll cut from that in upcoming months. There are 2, 4, 6, 8. And those are the F pieces. All right. So I am going to organize this space just a little bit better, and then we are going to chat about the piecing instructions. Okay. I've got everything laid out much tidier than it was just moments ago. And I am on page 2 of my pattern here. We're just going to work our way down through the pattern. My instructions include pressing. So when you see the double arrow like this is telling you to press your half square triangles open. Arrows going in one direction are telling you which way to press all of those seams. So you can always look for the pressing instructions. And we're just going to work our way through here. So the first thing that we want to do is mark a diagonal line across the back of an F square. This is going to be our background squares, and we're actually going to need to mark diagonal lines across the back of all of these. And you can use your favorite method for making half square triangles. I often find, or right now, I go in stages where I like different techniques. I do a lot of different ways of making half square triangles. For this block of the month, rather than drawing just the one diagonal line and then marking and then sewing on both sides of that diagonal line, I have been preferring marking both lines. So if I'm marking, I don't always mark. Sometimes I will use diagonal seam tape, or I have different guides on my sewing machine I can use for marking, or for not marking, for piecing half square triangles without marking. So sometimes I'll use that. Triangle paper I'll use. Just depends on the project, the way I like to do things. For this one, my guess is that I'm going to mark a lot of these this way, especially when you're doing just one block a month. It doesn't feel like a lot of time wasted marking everything. When you sit down to sew 300 half square triangles at one time, those are the times when I might be opting for a non-marking method. I do like diagonal seam tape. I find it to be a nice efficient way to make half square triangles, but I don't always use it, like today. So if you have a favorite way of making half square triangles, you can go ahead and utilize that method. Okay, we have 2 more to go. We'll have these all marked. This right here, you'll see I still have a little bit of these selvage dots on this edge. I got my trimming fairly close when I was trimming the selvages, but I do have some there. I'm not worried about those. I know that when it comes time to trim, I'll be trimming a little bit of that off when I trim these half square triangles, and then I'll be losing them in my seam allowance. So I don't mind having a little bit of those dotted selvages. If it would be enough that I know that it would still be visible after the blocks are made, that is when I would want to trim that down just a little bit more. So those are marked. And you can see that the first thing we're going to be doing right here is we are making half square triangles. So we are going to be pairing these with A, and we are going to be making a total of 16 half square triangles. So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew on both of my marked lines. I'm going to cut them apart on that center diagonal, and then I'm going to press the seams open, and then these get trimmed down to 2.5 inches square. I am just now finishing trimming up these half square triangles. They're all getting trimmed down to 2.5 inches square. And just like with making half square triangles, there's also a lot of different options we can use for trimming our half square triangles. I am using just a square ruler to trim this batch. I do different ways, again, depending on my mood and the project. So use whatever technique you like to for trimming these down. You can trim once they're pressed. Some people prefer to trim before they're pressed. There are specialty rulers for trimming. Lots of different ways that we can trim these down, but you just need to get them all down to 2.5 inches square. Got 2 more to go. You'll notice that I'm separating these into 2 piles. And the reason I'm doing that is because we are only using half of the half square triangles that we make today for this block. We're going to save the other half to use in a future block. It's going to set us up so that as we near the end of the project, you know, sometimes you start with well-meant intentions, and as the year gets on, you might start to fall back behind just a little bit. By prepping some of the pieces that we're going to need for future blocks, we're going to set ourselves up for success. So, you know, you'll get part way through and you might start thinking, oh man, I'm getting behind, I'm not staying on task. But then lo and behold, you've got extra pieces already made for some of those future blocks. And that is going to be very handy. So I'm just dividing them as I go. I'm going to use 8 in this block, and then we'll save those other 8 that are now all trimmed and ready to go for a future block. So I'm going to tuck those to the side. Make sure that you just keep those with your scraps, keep those with your background fabric. You don't want to lose those because then that defeats the whole purpose of having made them ahead. So keep track of those. I am actually going to be storing all of my pieces in a project bag for right now. I don't know if I will continue using this bag as my blocks get made, but for right now, in the middle of our house move, I need to kind of keep everything really contained. So this is where everything is going for now. So I'll tuck those half square triangles down in here. I'm going to tuck my Cali & Co scraps, my pieces, all the things down in this project bag, and that's going to keep everything contained for me for at least the time being. Now let's talk about the next step here. Those little pieces out of the way. Next, we are going to be making our block center. It's this portion of our block right here. You can see that happening here in step 2. In addition to the half square triangles that we just made, we are also going to be using these B squares. And I'm just realizing, as I look at my half square triangles, I need to go back up and press those open. I inadvertently pressed to one side. So before I sew this together, I'm going to press those open. I have a woolly pressing bar that I love using for pressing my seams open. I'll bring it back down when I am finished sewing this center together so that you can see it, because I just love pressing seams open with it. But I'm going to go ahead and lay everything out. Let's do that. Let's just choose our layout here. All right, so our B squares, but then I can't forget to repress those seams. The reason we're doing that is so that they lay nicer when they come together right here. It's just going to make a nice flatter section when our seams are pressed open on those. But I can't forget to do that step. All right, let's get this laid out here. So we're going to have B's in our corners. I'm just going to maybe just grab what comes and see how it looks. You can take as much or as little time on your layout planning. Sometimes this step can get away from us a little bit if we start to overthink fabric placement. It can be easy to do. This is a very scrappy block, and once all of the blocks are together with the setting that it's in, it's just really scrappy, full of lots of fun fabrics. You're not really going to notice exact fabric placement, so just something to keep in mind if you tend to be an overthinker when it gets to this step. All right, get my diagonal oriented the right direction. Let's pop an orange one in here, maybe this red one. We'll put this pink one. See, sometimes they just sort of fall how you want them to if you just let them be. What else do we need? Okay, well, I don't want that one. Ah, looks like I inadvertently got that same print, but that's going to be just fine. I didn't even notice that when I was picking my fabrics earlier, but no worries. Let's put you down here. Blue over here. Maybe we'll do, what do we want? This yellow? We want the green. Do green there. It's just getting a little contrasty in the center. I might actually, let's just swap you out there. I think I like that better. I'll put this one here, this one here. Well, we're going to tuck this down here, and you can come here. I think I'm going to swap this around just a little bit. I think maybe just these two. And only because I didn't like having the red and the orange side by side. That's why I'm making that switch. I think I like that better. Okay, so that's going to be our block center right there, and then I'm just going to sew the rows together like this, and then they get pressed adjacent seams in opposite directions. After you sew the rows together, after you sew all of the pieces in each row together, then you sew the completed rows together to complete your center block. You're going to press those seams in one direction, and this center should measure 8.5 inches square once it is sewn together. Here is what our block looks like now. And this is that woolly pressing bar that I mentioned. And sometimes I'm underwhelmed with sewing notions or tools or rulers or what have you. And sometimes you just hit one and you just love it. I think we've all had different notions that way, that have worked that way for us. This is one that I love. I was really surprised how much more quickly I can press seams open using this. Really surprised. I am very happy with this, and I always use it for pressing my seams open. It is the Ewe Me woolly pressing bar. There are various lengths. This one is the 12-inch length, so I can do pretty long sections of pressing open if I want to, but I love it, so I did want to mention it. You may have wonderful techniques for pressing your seams open, but this is one that I use and can recommend. So again, this is our center block. We are now moving on to page 3 of our pattern. The first thing that we're going to do is sew our G rectangles to both sides of the block. After we sew G to both sides, then we are going to sew H to the top and the bottom. You will want to follow those pressing instructions that you see listed here, pressing everything away from the center. Once you have sewn the background border to the block center, you are then going to sew your print rectangles on the sides and the top and bottom. So your C squares will then go on the left and the right, and your D, I think I said C squares, your C rectangles will go on the left and right, and your D rectangles will go on the top and the bottom. And then we'll have just one more fun little step that we need to complete once we have this portion sewn together. And this is what our block looks like now. Show you the pressing on the back. This should measure 12.5 inches square at this point in time. The last thing that we need to do is add stitch and flip corners. So what we are going to do for these is mark them slightly differently than what you might be used to marking stitch and flip corners. Typically, we are just marking one diagonal line. We're going to start with that. We're going to mark one diagonal line from corner to corner on the back of your E square. You locate my pencil here. But then we want to go ahead and mark an additional diagonal line that is 1/2 inch away from that first. So I am placing my 1/2 inch line right on the diagonal I just marked, and I'm going to mark a second line. So this is what it's going to look like. You'll have a marked diagonal going from corner to corner, and then 1/2 inch away, you're going to have a second marked diagonal. You want to mark all of these E squares in the same manner. And this is going to allow us to utilize the corners that we trim off from our stitch and flips. You're going to see what I mean in just a moment. Let me get these marked, and then I'm going to show you how to place these and sew. One more to go. And then that last 1/2 inch away from the marked diagonal. Now we are going to place these on all 4 corners of our block. You're going to see the illustration here. You want the second line that you drew on the outside edge of the block. So this line that is 1/2 inch away from the marked diagonal should be on the outer corner of your block. You do not want it like this, where that second line you marked is on the inside. So make sure that you place it like so. You are going to sew on both lines, and then you are going to trim 1/4 inch away or down the center of this section right here. You see this illustrated right here in step number 3. So sewing on both marked diagonals, trimming right in the center of both of those sewn lines. You're going to repeat that for every one of these corners. Each corner gets a stitch and flip. Pay attention and make sure that that second line is on the outer corner, on the outer edge, and not on the center, not on the center side. So these are going to go like this. And then I'm going to go up to the sewing machine and sew those, and I will pop back in and show you the cutting on these corners. You can see what this looks like now that it has been sewn. I've sewn on the marked lines, and all of those secondary lines are on the outside corners of each corner. The next thing that we want to do is trim this off. Everything is still sewn together, so I want to trim these corners. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place my 1/4 inch right on this marked diagonal, the diagonal that runs from corner to corner, not the exterior line. So I'm going to be placing this right on that corner to corner diagonal, and then I'm going to cut that off. That's a little bit scary to do that, but now you're going to see that when we press this out, we're going to get these fun corners like what you see in the tilde block. And this little guy here is going to make a block like this. We're going to press these also. You're going to see this in step 5. Press the seam towards E. So we're going to press towards that solid fabric there, the non-pieced fabric, and then trim these to 3.5 inches square. You're going to end up with 4 of these. So press them just like you see here. We're going to be saving these units and using them in a fun little bonus project. So hang on to these and tuck those down in with your scraps, with your extra fabrics, your blocks, wherever you're storing this project from month to month, hang on to these. We're going to repeat this for each corner. And then I'll get these pressed and trimmed. And our first block for the Cali & Co. Mystery Block of the Month is going to be complete. One more corner to trim, and then just a wee bit of pressing. You'll see that all of these corners get pressed away from the center. I'm going to go up to my iron and do that. At the same time, I'm going to press these as well. And here is what your completed block is going to look like. This should still measure 12.5 inches square. Let's take a look at this one beside the Tilda one. I think they're both pretty. If you've been watching these videos for a little while where I've been sharing that we're going to be doing this block of the month, I was getting questions asking about different fabric lines. Will it look nice in Christmas? Will it look nice in primary? Could I use solids? And I kept saying, I think it's going to look really nice in a lot of different fabric lines. And I still think that's the case. I think it's going to work well for lots of different fabric lines. It works great for using up your scraps. So here you can see it in Cali & Co. Here we have it in Tilda. I think they're both going to be really pretty. And I'm excited to see the different options that you guys start coming up with as you start piecing your blocks. If you want to join, or if you're already a member of the private Facebook group for Coriander Quilts, I'd love to see you share your blocks there. I'll link to that group down below so that if you're not a member, you can feel free to join. The last thing that I want to talk about, well, let's look at the pressing back here first, so you can see how that presses up. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is those extra little corners. These are what your little stitch and flip corners are going to look like once you cut them, once you trim them from your corners. And you can trim these to 3.5 inches square. And so I'm just going to go ahead and trim a couple of these here for you. And we're going to use these in a fun project that I'll share after we are done with our blocks. And it's just a fun way to utilize those little corners. I'm not worrying too much about keeping these widths the same as I trim from block to block, because I know that as I go from month to month, sometimes they're going to be a little wider in these borders, and sometimes they're going to be a little wider on this side, and I'm not going to keep track of how I trimmed every month. So I'm just trimming them to 3.5 inches square, not worrying about if I'm keeping this width the same from month to month. I think that's just going to make it easier, and this is going to be just a fun little extra bonus scrappy project, so I'm not too concerned if it's all the same. If you want to be very precise and make sure those widths are all the same from month to month, you certainly can. That's up to you. For me, that just seems like something I don't want to keep track of from month to month. So 3.5 inches on all of these, and then we'll do something fun with them at the end. Get my little pieces out of the way. Whoop, I like going that way. I like when my larger piece is on the left side there when I'm trimming. Did I do it that way all the time, or am I just thinking that in my head? I don't know. We've almost got these all trimmed. 3.5. And they're kind of just a scrappy little half square triangle. And if you've been a quilter for any length of time, you know we can always do fun things with half square triangles. The sky is kind of the limit on a half square triangle. And this is just a fun little spin on a half square triangle. So there they are. So we've got all of these little cuties, our Cali & Co. block, plus our little scrappy half square triangles. You can probably start to see how much fun you could have with these, putting them so many different ways. They're going to do fun things. Doing them this way. They're just going to be really fun to play with. They're going to do just fun things. So let's peek at our first block. Well done. Thank you for following along. If you have questions, feel free to let me know. Links are down in the description box for all of the things I mentioned. I have the PDF pattern. It's a free download over on my blog. You can just open it up, download it, print it out, and away you go. That includes that helpful information that we went over right at the beginning of the video. So you'll have that included in with your block 1 pattern. And again, if you've missed any of the previous information, those fabric requirements, the calendar of dates, the Q&A video, I'll have all of that information linked below as well. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I will catch you again next time.